All right, everyone. I see a few registrants have joined us already. If you have, awesome, welcome. If you could go before we start to the poll page at the bottom and answer the poll question, that would be awesome. We're going to start in just a few minutes. Thanks. All right, more people have joined us now. Really quickly, we're going to start in a couple of minutes, but if you could, before we start, go to the bottom of your webinar page to the section titled Polls and answer the poll question before we begin. That would be great. We'll start at 12:30 sharp. Looks like a few more people have joined us. If you just joined us, I would love it if you could go to the bottom of your webinar page and answer the poll question before we begin. We're going to begin at 12:30 sharp. All right, it's now 12:30. Welcome, everyone, to our Running the Race to Digital First Content Strategy for Museums. My name is Kartik, and I'm really excited to be talking about this topic with you all today. Before we start, a couple of housekeeping things and logistics that we have to go through. As you're joining us, please go to the bottom of your webinar page, go to the polls tab and answer the poll question that we've sent out to all of the registrants. This just helps us gauge where everybody's at with this topic. The recording will be sent out to all registrants within a couple hours after the webinar is over, so look out for that. Use the chat to share any technical issues that you may have. So if you can't see the screen at any one time, if you can't hear me, we have a person standing by to help you out through all of that. You can ask questions throughout. I'll address them at the end during our Q&A session, but to ask questions, you can go to the question tab down at the bottom of your webinar page and just submit your question there. Your first name will appear alongside your question. A little intro about me. So my role is customer success and account manager at Vermont. In this role, I work with museums all around the country and help them create great digital content and help them use that content to market themselves and also to provide a great visitor experience for their people arriving at their museum. I have a degree in industrial labor relations from Cornell University, and I'm really passionate about the intersection of storytelling and technology, how especially those two working together can drive forward your marketing and your goals. A little bit about Vermont. So Vermont started about 4 years ago, and it seeks to address an issue that many museums are facing. So as technology keeps growing and changing, audiences are accessing content in really different ways. Museums lack either the time or the resources to really keep up with those changes, and that's where Vermont really comes in. We offer free technology benefits that are used by attractions and museums to help them create great content that is accessible via web and mobile and helps you reach those audiences that are using technology to access content. Now that we've covered the basic, boring intro logistics, now we can get into the meat of our content, which is about content marketing and how it's applied to museums. I'm going to start off with just talking about why content marketing is important for museums. Why is this a topic that we need to be covering today? Then I'll jump into two case studies, the Taubman Museum of Art and the Design Museum of Chicago, where they both used Vermont as a way to amplify their content strategy. I'll discuss some key takeaways from this whole presentation and then leave plenty of time for questions from all of you. What is content marketing? That is the question of the day. Content marketing is really about creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content. That's the dictionary definition, but it's really about creating a very trusting and valuable relationship between you, the organization, the museum, and your potential user, your potential visitor, whoever you're trying to reach out to. It's about creating that relationship. And the way you're creating that relationship is through valuable content. So as you're sharing that content, they're engaging with that content and trusting you and learning more about you, and eventually going to visit your actual museum space. Why is this important? As I mentioned before, it's really about building that trust and that bond, and that's shown to improve the quality and quantity of your visitors. Not only will this lead to more visitors arriving at your museum, but if done well, it can also lead to more engaged visitors that are arriving. People aren't just coming in, looking at one exhibit and leaving. They're really looking to find the stories and collect the content that they read about and are excited about. The second thing is it improves your organization's ability to learn. Having a content marketing content strategy really allows you to understand who your audience is. This is an audience-focused approach. You're building it based around who you're trying to target. You can understand who your primary audience is. You can also understand what is working well to reach that audience and what isn't, and kind of prune your marketing that way. Finally, and I think most importantly, you can really further the mission of your museum and share your passion for your topic that your museum covers, whether it be history, art, architecture, culture, so on and so forth. You can amplify your goals of your entire museum, whether it be education, inspiration, innovation, through an effective content marketing strategy as well. Now, I get this question a lot of, all right, I understand why this is valuable. I understand why it's needed. How do I build valuable content and then snowballs into all of those benefits that I talked about? And the answer to that is really about building a story, building a hook. Charles Corver, who's the chief content officer at the SF MoMA, really describes this as a memorable, emotionally resonant way to connect with a fundamentally foreign object. Me, a person learning about your museum for the first time, doesn't know anything about it. So I need to find that hook, that connection, in order to really build that engagement, take the time to peruse that content, and then seek to learn more about your museum by actually visiting. He describes this as a seduction. I mean, it doesn't have to be a seduction per se, but I think it needs to evoke a tone that's excited, passionate, things that you're already doing with the content that you're sharing, but in a digital way. Now that I've covered why this is an important topic, I really want to touch on the two case studies that I talked about. So I'll be talking about two museums that we worked with where we implemented Vermont to amplify a museum's content strategy. Before I talk about each of the museums, I want to describe the 5-step process that we took for each of those museums as we built out their strategy. We started off with defining a goal. What is your goal with all of this, with content marketing and building a content strategy? What do you want to accomplish is really important, and it comes before any of the other steps that you need to take. Once you have that defined goal set, it's really about knowing your stories. What's already out there? What content already exists? Museums are content generators. You guys are pushing out content, whether it be through your exhibits, through your already promotions and marketing materials. So you already have this existing. How can you kind of compile them together and create a story, a hook that can entice an audience? Once you have that prepared, it's really about identifying your audiences and personas. Who do you need to reach out to, whether it be a new audience that you're trying to reach, an existing audience that you're trying to improve engagement within? Those are the kind of parameters that you need to set. Once you have those two ready to go, it's really about creating a content calendar that lays out your requirements and when you're going to execute on different pieces of content. Then it's about creating it, putting it all together, whether it be through a technology, whether it be through your email newsletter platform, a blog, etc., just putting it all together and coalescing it. And then lastly, but certainly most importantly, promoting your new experience across all of your social media digital platforms to make sure it reaches your audience effectively. All right, now that we've covered the process, let's go into the exciting examples that we have for you today. The first example is the Taubman Museum of Art. I've actually never been to this museum, but I love their art, their story, and the content that they've published, the digital content they've shared through Vermont. This museum is located in Roanoke, Virginia, which is in the southern part of Virginia. They have 14 major exhibits and galleries that feature some of their permanent collection, feature rotating artists from different other museums, but also feature new artists they want to showcase and make sure that they get visibility. With all of these, they turned to Vermont really for two reasons. One, they wanted to create digital content that they could use easily for marketing purposes. And two, they wanted to create an informational guide across all of those 14 galleries that they have to make sure people know about those new artists that they may not have heard about or things in their permanent collection that they should explore. Before they started on any of the content strategy marketing piece, they stepped back a little and did a digital audit of what they already had available. So in terms of their digital footprint, they had a website, and their website served an important purpose. It showcased information about their museum, it showcased major information about their exhibits, and even featured some of their pieces from their collection. So they definitely had that as their main digital focus. What they wanted to create, and why they turned to Vermont, was to create that mobile experience. They wanted people to be able to pull something up while they were at the museum or while they were perusing other content on mobile and learn more about their museum. Once they determined kind of the technological requirements they wanted to set forth, the first step is really to know your story. What content already exists out there that you need to compile together and build to make an effective content strategy? As I mentioned before, their website was chock full of content about their current exhibitions. So they really pulled from this, as well as detailed information from their actual exhibits in order to build that story, build that content. Once they had that piece settled, it was really about identifying their audience. Who did they want to reach out to? They focused on two different visitor personas here. They wanted to focus on millennial visitors and family visitors. Each of them have very different needs and interests, but they tried to combine the two together into creating content that worked for both. So for millennial visitors, they're really focused on a combination of very educational, informative content that appears in a well-designed and visually appealing way. This content should be focused on new experiences and local culture, and should feature as one of its major elements, a way to easily book on mobile. So whether that be tickets, tours, etc., a way to peruse the content and then click a link to directly book a ticket or book a tour. For family visitors, they're really concerned with logistics and planning, even before they arrive at the museum. So in thinking about this persona, we really want to make sure that we're identifying important information about the museum. Can I bring strollers? Can I bring food, etc.? Itineraries. So how do you navigate the museum? What are the different places that I can go? How much time should I be spending in each of those? And then wayfinding, which is an important feature as well. How do I get to this museum and how do I navigate the museum once I'm inside? They're interested in visiting major museums, which was this was a major museum in their region, as well as kid-friendly activities, which they had a lot of and they wanted to emphasize. Once the Taubman Museum selected their two personas and identified their needs and interests, the next step was really setting about the content requirements and creating their calendar. For that, they decided to use existing resources, as I mentioned earlier. They had their website, it was full of content, they had their exhibits, they pulled those together to develop their content. They used their internal team to create that content. What they decided to do was create the content and then launch it during the Virginia Association of Museums conference, which was happening nearby. So not only would this, since they were a participant, they could showcase this to other museums, but this was an important way for them to attract people, museum goers that were going, conference goers that were going to the museum conference to come to their museum and check it out. Before I move on, let me show you the snapshot of what it looked like. So this is the cover page of that digital guide, as I like to call it. So it just lists the title and it lists a basic description of the museum. Once I click go, we can explore deeper into what they really put into their content to make it really valuable and really engaging. What I thought the Taubman Museum did really well was to feature major pieces from their collection that were visually inspiring, visually engaging, and make sure that they took front and center stage in their digital content. So this is an example of their permanent collection page, but they featured important works of art, but also beautiful and engaging works of art that they could share within their digital guide. This was also a very informative and educational piece. If you look at this screenshot over here, you can see that not only is there text, but also artist quotes, gallery of images, there's video, there's links to ticket and tour pages. So this isn't just a boring description that somebody's reading on a website. This is a really engaging, informative piece of content that people are looking through and exploring. Lastly, the Taubman Museum really wanted to emphasize wayfinding. They wanted people that were around their area to make sure that they can navigate to their museum effectively. This is really important for the family visitors that we talked about earlier. So for each of the different exhibition pages, at the bottom, you can go to the map and see how close you are to the museum and how to get there. Myself, I'm in Chicago, so it's quite a bit of a drive to get there, but for anybody that's in the local area, they can look on their phones, read a little bit about the content, look at the bottom and see that, oh, the museum is 2 blocks away, let me go check it out. After creating this content, they really promoted this content well. They leveraged their existing resources on web and social, so they created several Facebook posts, Instagram posts, etc., about this content so people knew about it and could go explore it. They also aligned these promotions with different events that were happening. So they have major events in spring and summer that they showcase this content before those events. They also showcased it before different exhibition openings, if they had changing exhibits or temporary exhibits, so that people were aware that this content existed. Finally, and you can see this circled in orange, they added links to their tour and ticket pages so that people had access to book a tour or buy a ticket directly from the content they were publishing. With this content, the Taubman Museum was able to generate hundreds of views and effectively fulfill their goals of creating digital content that was easily marketable and making sure that they could create something that was an informational guide for people that were arriving at their museum. The next case study is a local one in our Chicago area that I'm really excited to talk about. So this is the Design Museum of Chicago. This is a small specialized museum whose mission is really to innovate, educate, and inspire through design. They do one exhibition at a time and do their temporary exhibits that range from 3 to 6 months. And so they do 1 or 2 a year. Their most recent one, which was really exciting, was on Chicago cycling history. As they launched the exhibit, they noticed a couple issues that they wanted to correct, and they reached out to Vermont to help help them create digital content that could fix these issues. One of those was that the exhibit was located in multiple locations. So part of the exhibit was in one location downtown, and the other part was in a location a couple blocks away. Visitors went to one location, didn't know there was another one, couldn't go to another one. So they wanted to create a digital tour that showcased both of those locations and created a cohesive exhibit. This was a temporary exhibit, so this was closing in a couple of months. And so they wanted to make sure that their curatorial work and their hard work in putting this exhibit together could live on past the exhibit closing time. Lastly, they also did a digital audit and found that they had a website. It was mainly informational. It only provided information about their museum and their hours, etc., and didn't really provide much content. So they wanted to amplify that and also wanted to create a mobile presence for their museum. They didn't have the time or resources to invest in an app or another addition to their website, so they turned to Vermont for web and mobile experiences that could fill that quota. Step one, know your stories. For this, we had them ask 3 questions and give us their answers to those questions. The first question is, what are the major needs of your museum technologically? As I mentioned earlier, they had a website, but they really wanted to create a mobile presence. They wanted people to be able to look on their phones as they were navigating an exhibit space and learn more about Chicago cycling history, watch a video about Chicago cycling history that couldn't be featured within their actual physical space. Second, what is their goal for sharing content? This was really about 2 things. One, making sure they close the gap between the 2 physical locations and create a cohesive digital exhibit. And 2, this was really about creating something that could last past their temporary exhibit closing time. Finally, how does this connect with your museum's mission? Their mission is to educate and inspire through design. They wanted to make sure they could create content that was inspirational, that they could use for their marketing purposes, but also content that could serve an educational purpose, that they could share with people even after this physical exhibit closed, to showcase Chicago cycling history and even do an event around it, etc. Once they defined their story, what they wanted to feature, their mission, and how this aligned with that, the next step was really to identify their audience. As I mentioned before, they chose millennial visitors, and millennial visitors like a combination of visual inspiration with educational content that focuses on local culture and new experiences. After identifying their audience, they really set about creating content requirements and creating that calendar that we talked about earlier. Since everything existed in their physical space, they had text readily available, they had video, they had images that they were showcasing in their physical space. They pulled all of those together to create their digital content. So they used existing resources, and they were able to do it internally. What was great about this experience as well was that they were able to launch it not when the exhibit opened right away, but they waited about a month and launched this digital experience during their first event about their exhibit. So they didn't wait for the buzz of the launch. They decided to build momentum and keep momentum going by waiting a couple weeks and then launching this digital experience. This is the cover image you can see on the right of what this digital experience looked like. It gave a broad description, and the title was Keep Moving, Designing Chicago's Cycling History. I want to take you guys on a deeper look of some of the great things that they did within this experience. What was great about this experience was that they were able to evoke a sense of Chicago cycling history through time by using historical photographs. This was visually inspiring, but also really educational. You could look up companies that no longer existed that produce hundreds and thousands of bicycles in Chicago alone. What was great about this content as well was that they were able to highlight local spots and do some behind the scenes storytelling. Many people in Chicago know the United Center. It's a major sporting center in the city, but probably not many people know that it has a very important role in cycling history within the city of Chicago. So they were able to pinpoint spots around the city of Chicago, not just within their local exhibit spaces, that tied to this important topic of cycling history. And they were able to use Vermont's map feature, as you can see in this image over here, to show it visually and show it in a, not just in a description series of text. Once they'd created this content, they went about promoting it as well. This is an example of one of their Facebook posts, But they really utilized the content across all of their different social media platforms and created several posts that went out during when the exhibit ran, the physical exhibit ran. They were also able to, after the exhibit closed, use this content for a marketing purpose to inspire people about design, but also to share this content as a way to educate their audience about cycling history, and since they had digital content that lived on for posterity. Before we jump into takeaways and Q&A, I want to summarize the 5-step process that we took through both of those case studies. We start off with goals and KPIs. What is the goal for your content strategy? What do you want to accomplish? Then you go to the first step. What content do you have readily available, and how can you piece that together into a story? The second step is to identify your audiences and personas. Who do you want to target, whether that be a new audience or an existing audience that you want to build engagement within? The next step is to create a content calendar and set about content requirements. Then is the easy part, creating content with persona and goal in mind. You need to make sure that your audience is in mind as well as your ultimate goal while you're creating this content. Finally, promote this new experience to social media and other digital platforms to make sure that you're reaching that audience effectively. A couple of key takeaways from this whole presentation that I want you to walk away with. One is that content marketing is really effective as long as you have a strategy. Creating content for content's sake is not very effective, but really understanding what is the goal, why am I creating this content, and making sure that you're thinking about that as you're building any type of content is really important for this approach. Second, this is an audience-focused approach. So this really focuses on identifying your audience and how building value with that audience using stories. Lastly, we shared a 5-step process with you that we've used for content strategy. You can use this process for any type of content that you're creating, not just Vermont content. So if you're creating blogs, if you're creating a newsletter, you can use this process for that content as well. You can also define your own process that works well for you. All right, now that I've covered takeaways, I'm excited to get your questions. Please let me know if you have any questions about the case studies, about content strategy in general, about Vermont. I'm happy to answer any of those. Oh, we have some questions in the chat, I think. All right, so Ayoka, I hope I'm saying that name right, has a question. How long should these stories be, and what is the best platform to share the stories? Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr. For the stories, we recommend 5 or 6 pages. And by pages, I mean different sections of content. So if I take the case studies as an example, the Taubman Museum showcased not all 14 of their galleries, but 5 or 6 of their best, most engaging galleries, and decided to write up a 200 to 500 word description of each of them, including pictures, video, text, etc. They also decided to share their stories primarily on Facebook because that's the platform that they were really used to. In terms of what is the best platform to share your stories on, I would say it depends on the audience that you're trying to reach. Instagram is really popular with millennials, so I would say focus on Instagram if you're targeting that audience. Facebook may be for families. So really understanding what your audience is using and how you can tailor that to your audience based on who you want to reach. It should, in terms of how long your content should be as well, it should take about 2 to 5 minutes for you to consume all of that content. So that's including text, video, media, etc. All right, so Amy has a question. How much time roughly did it take Taubman Museum for each phase of the process, including audiences, brainstorming content, developing content on mobile, then promoting? This was something that was really surprising to me. This actually didn't take a lot of time. So they already had an idea of who they wanted to reach, and they already had an idea of what content they could use and build and develop. The real time-consuming part of this, and by time-consuming I mean a couple hours, was putting that content, bringing that together and putting it on Vermont. Promoting, they were able to incorporate it really well into their existing promotion calendar and schedule, so this didn't take much time as well. The Design Museum of Chicago, it took a little longer for them because they didn't have as much resources in terms of staff and in terms of time. So in terms of time frame, they needed to focus on building out their physical exhibit first. So they spent time doing that, and then once they had compiled all of that text and media, they were able to quickly input that into the Vermont technology platform, and then generate the digital content that they can then share on mobile. I hope I answered both of your questions. We have another question from Nick. What is more important, web or mobile? This really depends on doing that digital audit that I talked about earlier and figuring out where do I have my strongest footing and where do I really need to expand in terms of digital. For both of the case studies that I described, mobile was really important for them. They wanted something that could be handheld, that could be accessed easier than going on a website on your computer and checking out content. So for your museum, this could be if you already have a website, maybe focusing on mobile more. If you feel like your web presence as well as your mobile presence could use an uplift or just become better, you can use the Vermont technology, for example, as a way to reach both those different types of technology. Do you have any recommendations on blogging frequency? I would say this really depends on the bandwidth for most museums. We recommend creating evergreen content that can be reshared frequently. So I've worked with several museums who spend hours every week compiling information, trying to research new information just to create a new blog post. And honestly, this was a waste of time for them when they could be resharing some of their old content in a new and intuitive way. What I would say is you should do 1 to 2 pieces for your for every exhibition that you have. So you can generally generate 1 to 2 blog posts for different exhibits. Some exhibits, if they're larger, can definitely have more. All right, so Ayoka asked about affinity websites. For clarity, she has one site that's the main site and then built another site for a project. So for affinity sites, this is difficult to rate highly on search. So since you have your main site, most people are going to go to your main site and not a lot of people are going to go to that project site. But this can be an effective tool if you decide to keep that domain and decide to focus your time and energy on making sure that people are accessing it and making sure that people are getting to that project site. But ideally, you want to keep your visitors on one web presence digitally. What was great about Vermont is that there was an audience that was already going to the Vermont website, so they were able to attract a new audience that wasn't going to either the Taubman Museum website or the Design Museum website, and make sure that they could reach an audience that way. But in general, if you're doing multiple sites, it's better to coalesce them together. Vermont actually has an option to add on to your existing site if you're interested in that. We call that our brandable option. If you do create multiple sites, I would say make sure you share with your visitors about it and dedicate specific space and resources for promotions for that specific site. Any other questions? These were great. All right, I'll give it a couple more seconds. All right, if there isn't anything else, I want to share quickly a special offer with all of you. So as registered for this webinar for the month of July, we will offer every organization that signs up for Vermont a digital tour for free created by our professional services team. Several museums have already taken us up on this, so if you want to see examples, just email me. But if you want to get started and are interested to learn more about the offer, you can email me as well. And finally, thank you for attending. You're a great audience. I really enjoyed talking to you today. Keep an eye out for the recording. For further questions or to schedule a demo, you can email me as well. And if you want to learn more about Vermont in general, visit our website. Thank you.